October 4th, 2024. A user by the name of Manicore, known for her series, The Monument Mythos, releases a brand new video unprompted. Its name? The Thing Columbus Brought. Over the following months, 3 more videos were uploaded to the channel. Due to a lack of coverage on the series, I've taken it upon myself to watch all the videos and theorize on them. Without a further ado, let's begin the video. October 12th, 1492, Christopher Columbus arrives in Guanahani. Fabled European voyager Christopher Columbus arrives on a small island named Guanahani. He believes this island is in India. In actuality, it's a part of the Bahamas in North America. Columbus, believing the island to be India, renames the natives to Indians. One day, his crew falls ill with scurvy. In order to cure this scurvy, he asks the natives for a bunch of fruit. Columbus demands 450 pounds for the 90 sailors and 30 pounds for the ship Jester. They simply reply, "Who is the ship Jester?" Columbus opens the cargo and reveals this. A fort, La Navidad, is built by the crew. Later, after these events, Columbus and his crew decide to make a fort out of the wreckage of the Santa Maria. More time passes, and eventually, Columbus and his men decide to go back to Spain. However, he decides to leave behind 40 individuals, the 40th being unaccounted for. Who is the 40th individual, you may ask? None other than the Jester. After realizing he's a few men short, Columbus decides to set sail back for America. When he returns, he finds La Navidad in flames, all 39 men dead, and the Jester being praised by the natives. The Jester is then recaptured, and the natives are treated as crazy. January 27th, 1996. 500 years later, France prepares its final nuclear test. In an odd twist, we flash forward to the 1990s and get a broadcast about then-President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton proceeds to talk about a treaty that he had signed to prevent nuclear testing. And with that, the video ends. It followed Lewis and Clark recounts the story of Lewis, Clark, Sacagawea, and York. For those who don't know, York is a less talked about member of the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was the only African-American man to join the expedition and was the personal servant of Clark. The video first tells us the history between York and Clark, before telling us how the Lewis and Clark expedition came to be. It stated that the natives that encountered York during the expedition ended up loving him for his wit and sense of humor. The video then tells us that York is apparently a highly effective communicator, right before flashing this image on the screen. One day, after receiving a haul of letters, to the surprise of Lewis and Clark, one of the letters is addressed to York. York tries to read the letter, only to realize that it's covered in very, very odd symbols. He rips up the letter, and a little while after, Sacagawea approaches him. Sacagawea takes the ripped up shreds and pieces them back together. This event causes the creation of a being known as Paper York. In a cruel twist, Paper York ends up being treated 10 times better than the actual York. Later, York ends up growing tired of the expedition and longs to go back to his home. After asking, Lewis and Clark let him go back home. When York finally returns home, he expects to find his wife in his bed, but to his surprise, the only thing that he ends up finding is a life-sized version of her made entirely of paper. Before York can process what he's seeing, the door behind him opens and the video ends. Long ago, there was a man by the name of Squanto, a man who had a fear ever since he was young. That fear was that his mere existence would bring about the end of his entire tribe. His mother, not wanting Squanto to fear, decides to teach him how to plant corn to pass the time. One day, while tending to the fields, Squanto ends up discovering a gigantic skeleton. The skeleton of the chimera is covered in white powder that, upon getting it on his fingers, Squanto ends up bringing back to the tribe. And, to his dismay, Squanto ends up accidentally causing a plague to befall his tribe due to the powder. Squanto's nightmare had become reality. But while he mourned, the world continued to spin. The leaves continued to blow, and the ocean continued to churn. Some pilgrims set up a colony nearby, and Squanto, wanting to help, teaches them how to plant corn. In return for teaching them how to plant corn, Squanto leads them back to the cornfield where all this started. Together, they bury the skeleton, and when the skeleton is buried, the plague finally ends. It Crossed the Land Bridge is a short video detailing the events of a man thousands of years ago meeting a mysterious creature. The video ends with it being revealed that this mysterious creature is actually the jester, implying it's been alive a lot longer than we initially thought. What the Seminoles Fought recounts the tale of the Seminole Wars, a war that took place in the early 1800s that involved Florida and Andrew Jackson. During the war, a U.S. general decides to start weaponizing the wildlife of Florida. This wildlife would eventually be known as minute fauna. Minute fauna made the already nightmarish war 10 times worse. And if things couldn't get any worse, Andrew Jackson comes down to Florida in the year 1818. But what the Seminoles didn't know at the time was that Andrew Jackson is no man. The video then ends with the words, "These are the skies the dead last saw." It Horrified Abe Lincoln talks about an unseen part of the Lincoln administration. In the video, we end up learning that Abraham Lincoln has the ability to transform into a gigantic head upon listening to music. This action is known as accessing the sublime. This ability allows him to, for lack of a better term, spectate the battlefield. This proves to be extremely useful as he ends up winning the war this way. Eventually, Abraham Lincoln grows fearful of this ability and decides to stop listening to music for nearly 2 years. What's important to note is that during the video, we end up hearing a very similar line to what was stated in What the Seminoles Fought. "These are the same skies that the dead last saw." The year was 1969. The Vietnam War had been raging for more than 10 years. The Americans, in dire need of soldiers, decided to start holding military drafts. While in our world these drafts were held by people, in the world of AAF they were instead held by paper men. Yes, you heard me right. Paper men. Implying that whatever Paper York was, there's more of him. And just like the previous 2 videos, it also ends up stating these are the same skies that the dead last saw. The video then comes to a close by revealing that the monster that we saw in the thumbnail is none other than the Lyndon B. Johnson. Do you remember how during the Lewis and Clark segment I told you to remember a certain image because it would be important later? This was the image. Apparently, this image shows Paper York trying to take over York's life. If you couldn't tell by the title, this video is a direct sequel to It Followed Lewis and Clark. Set only a few minutes after the second episode, York sets out on a quest to try and find the 4 individuals responsible for his wife's disappearance. While on his quest, York ends up having a dream in which a gigantic floating head tells him that if Paper York isn't stopped, he'll become king of America. Eventually, York ends up finding out the fates of all 4 men. Lewis and Clark are both listed as deceased, with their causes of death being unknown. Thomas Jefferson is listed as disfigured, but still alive. And Paper York is listed as alive, down in Florida, and being worshipped. However, in a completely unexpected scene, we end up seeing the outside of what seems to be a factory. And if you don't remember the factory, you may remember the name. Maze. 100 years after the events of the episode, Maze Machines ends up buying all the rights to all pictures of Paper York. If you need a refresher, Maze is a corporation that exists within the world of the Monument mythos. Maze on the surface may appear to just be your average tech corporation, but below the surface, they want to try and create TFMDs, true forces of mass destruction. And to our surprise, the final shot of the video is none other than the first photo of Paper York. What the Ship Jester Knew is the ninth and latest episode in the Alternate American Folklore series. It's a direct sequel to episodes 1 and 8. The video opens up by showing us a picture of the first ever natives on the moon. It then cuts to a video of Bill Clinton giving a speech. It also tells us that apparently, if the natives didn't sign the treaty, the US was going to quote unquote take their friend. What's important to note is that for only a split second, you can see this image flash in the video. People have taken this as Bill Clinton being under the control of a special tree. If not, Paper York. We then end up getting an audio snippet from a woman who's only referred to as MA. With that being said, everything in this interview sets off a fan of this series. To start off, the Jester is referred to as a TFMD, and apparently Bill Clinton wants control over it. Next, the Department of Technology, a joint effort between the US government and Maze, is mentioned. However, the most important part of this entire interview is the person speaking. There's only one other character that we know of that can be abbreviated to MA. Maya Arnoldson. If you need a reminder, Maya Arnoldson was an incredibly important character in Season 1 and 2 of the Monument Mythos. However, if you remember, you may or may not know that she's not alive anymore on account of certain people. After this, we travel hundreds of years ago into the past. York is exploring Florida when he comes across a stable for minute fauna. All minute fauna that we know of have been killed. After a bit of walking, York ends up discovering the same exact tree that was seen at the end of the last video. However, something very interesting that we end up learning is that he isn't alone. Thomas Jefferson walks up to Paper York. He gets struck with a bolt of lightning, and he falls through the earth. York approaches the tree, only for the exact same thing to happen. But this time, he simply disappears. The second to last shot of the video is a few DNA strands overlapping on one another. The biggest lore drop of this entire series is revealed. Thomas Jefferson and York fused together by getting AWS and turned into the Jester. This video was uploaded less than a week ago, so I'm going to try and speed by this as fast as I can. Ayanna, York's wife, whose name I neglected to mention for the entirety of the video, is alive and on the moon, although potentially not because Maze fictionalized the footage immediately after. John D. Rockefeller is back! Woo! And apparently the Rockefeller special tree was actually Paper York. Woo! Oh, and also Paper York is going around killing draft dodgers, with one of them being implied to actually be the one who narrated the thing that drafted men. We've come to the end of the line, so now all we can do is ponder. I'm gonna try my best to try and explain certain things within the series with the information that I have currently. I personally think Columbus will return in some way. Maybe he'll get AWS and become a monster. Maybe he'll just show up again in another upload. We don't know. Okay, here's the thing. We never see York fall into Wonderland. We know that they are in some way connected, but we never see York fall into Wonderland. So my idea is that potentially it's the mind of York piloting the body of Jefferson. My guess as to how the series will end is that Paper York and the Jester will have a big climactic showdown, with Ayanna helping out the Jester in order to beat Paper York once and for all. Depending on how you're asking, I have two answers. If you're asking what they are, then I have to answer animals or people fused together with AWS. Although I'm not really sure about the chimera because both of the fusions that we know of took place somewhere in Florida. But if you're asking why are they showing up, then I have to answer it's most likely a continuation of a more perfect union. Not the actual character, but the idea. Our final question of the day: which universe is this set in? If I had to guess, this universe is probably the Yorkverse, a brand new universe separate from the Dean, Nixon, Clift, and Pattinson verses. And with that, the video comes to a close. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants.